My name is Brian Albrecht, and I have the pleasure of serving on the Executive Committee for RCEDC, and so we welcome all of you here today. But I have the distinct honor of introducing a very, very distinguished guest to our community, and more importantly for me, a very dear friend of mine. Jennifer and I have been friends for many years in our work throughout the state of Wisconsin and her work throughout the country, and so it's a very privileged opportunity for me to introduce her to you. The topic of today's presentation, the talent crisis, building a 21st century manufacturing workforce, is not a surprise to anyone in this room, because I'm sure if you're in an employer, especially in the manufacturing sector, you've dealt with this whole identity crisis and the skill shortage that we have in trying to establish a more robust pipeline of workers for our community. So we're going to have a chance to hear some of the strategies that are being laid out across this nation under Jennifer's leadership. In April of this year, Jennifer was named the president of the National Association Manufacturers Manufacturing Institute, and she'll talk a little bit more about what the Institute is and what it does on all of our behalf in just a few minutes. But she has extensive experience in workforce development, employer engagement, and business. She is a proven leader in the Manufacturing Institute's chief architect of one of the organization's flagship initiatives, NAM's endorsed Manufacturing Skills Certification System. As the president of the Institute, Jennifer is responsible for driving an agenda focused on improving and expanding manufacturing in the United States through education, innovation, and research. Prior to joining the Institute, Jennifer was a member of the Senior Executive Services Team for the United States Department of Labor's Employment and Training Administration. In this role, she managed the President's High Growth Job Training Initiative, which incidentally was the foundation for Gateway's international partnership with Snap-on Corporation. Jennifer also serves as a member of the American National Standards Institute Personnel Certification and has been actively involved in many organizations such as the Precision Metal Forming Association and the Jobs for DC Graduates Board of Directors. Please join me in welcoming Jennifer McNelly to our community.
Thank you.
Go get them.
Thank you. That's an incredibly generous introduction, Brian, so thank you. Brian and I do go back, boy, I think it's over 10 years now, actually for activities that have gone on. He mentioned Snap-on, and I'll rewind a little bit and share some of my roots with your community here, and it all started with a cocktail napkin. And my background in workforce development actually is in the automotive sector. I was part of the team that helped build the nation's automotive youth apprenticeship program, the Automotive Youth Educational Systems. And I was the Washington office. So I sort of put that in quotes because there's not a lot of great stuff that comes out of Washington that solves the problems that are going on in your community. And how appropriate that I actually should be right after the volunteerism group, because in the end, the people that make the difference are the ones sitting in the chairs today. They're the individuals that employ the people in your communities, that pay taxes, that teach your kids, that solve those problems. So it's really about a community approach. And I'm a fairly dynamic individual with lots of ideas, and one day I thought about the work that I was doing with the automotive team, and sitting on the board of directors were our nation's automotive manufacturers. And it was probably the only time you saw all of those CEOs twice a year sitting around a table. Because what they fundamentally recognized was their problem. Interestingly enough, the design of the model wasn't even their problem, it was their dealer's problem, was bigger than them as manufacturers. So the CEOs, not the staff, the CEOs of Ford and Toyota and GM sat around a table and said, what do we do together? And in the process of that, we actually discovered that there was a bottleneck in this, and it happened to just be a process. So one day we sketched it on a cocktail napkin, and my dear friend George Ahrens at Snap-on, and I thought, who can help us with this? Let's call Brian Albrecht. Let's see if he's up for it. And lo and behold, over 10 years later, it's had a huge impact on the community here. And I'm really proud to have been, if nothing else, part of the one with the pen and the cocktail napkin. So Brian is a true leader in his nature here, and I know he's fighting and advocating on your behalf. So in his introduction, he actually mentioned that I'm with the Manufacturing Institute. And the Institute is actually affiliated with the National Association of Manufacturers. And for those of you in the room that are not familiar with the NAM, we are the largest and oldest industrial trade association representing manufacturing in Washington. It means that my colleagues on the other side of the house stump the hallowed halls of Capitol Hill on behalf of manufacturers. And they are advocating for policies that will ensure manufacturing competitiveness. Then you walk over to my side and I understand the language you speak. And in the end, I'm about helping you on the ground. How do I help make sure that you have the tools that you need to do what you need to do in your community and in your own backyard? And everything we do at the Institute is actually grounded fundamentally in research. There has to be something that substantiates why we're doing what we're doing. It's not because we had a good idea. It's because there was data behind it. And why does that matter? Because the voice of the individuals that we listen to are the manufacturers across the country. And the great benefit of being part of the NAM is what I like to call voice amplification. Because in the end, we stand pretty quiet on our own, but when we band together, we can get to impact. And that's really what we have the opportunity to do right now. And I think, sorry, we're almost there. There we go. So I'm going to sort of start with the picture of manufacturing, and I know the manufacturers in this room recognize this, that we have a legacy issue as to what people think about manufacturing. And I'm going to get into that a little bit later. But what I know is in every facility that I go to across the country, it is as likely that they are clean rooms as they are not. That they are streamlined, they are processed, and they are high tech. And most people don't really understand that about manufacturing. But in the end, manufacturing is important to this nation. We actually have seen it in the headlines. We actually saw in the first 5 minutes of the President's State of the Union this year, I timed till he said manufacturing. And then I counted how many times in his speech he talked about manufacturing. And it's not that it's just happening in the White House, it's happening in the State House. And governors across the country are talking about manufacturing. And mayors are talking about manufacturing. And they're doing it because manufacturing matters. More importantly, you see that manufacturers are on the front end of leading us out of this recession. And why is that? Because we're job creators. First tag in the Racine statement, job creation. Why manufacturing? It's about jobs. It's about jobs, it's about communities. In the end, we also see that manufacturers are looking back home. What does that mean for us? It means we need to be ready. But statistically, we also face a couple challenges on that front. Before we open our doors or turn on our lights, we as manufacturers are at a 20% cost differentiator to our largest trading partners. Before we do anything else, we already have to figure out how we're going to do it better. Now, fortunately for us as manufacturers, that's really what we do. It's what American manufacturing is about. It's about process improvement. It's about how we leverage technology and innovation to do things so that we can compete on the global stage. Because what I know is the corridor between it's Chicago and Milwaukee, heck, I wouldn't call you a corridor, I'd claim your name. Claim your name. You're the gateway to innovation here. But in the end, what I also know is this community competes with other nations. It's not just the jobs to the south, the north, the east, and the west. It's the ones across the sea. And in the end, we still have that 20%. I also know it's really important here in Wisconsin. I can't take credit for the tagline on the bottom. I was actually at the Wisconsin Manufacturing Extension Partnership Manufacturing Really Matters conference last week in Milwaukee. But in the end, I know, and Brian and I were just talking about this, 30% of the workforce. So if we counted off 1, 2, 3 and all stood up, somehow you're going to be connected to what I consider manufacturing. Look to the right, look to the left. It's about jobs. So manufacturing here in this community really matters. If you just look at it from a sheer statistical perspective on density, any economists in the room? location quotient. I don't really know what it means, but it means concentration. You're at the top of the list, right behind Indiana. As goes Wisconsin, so goes the nation. Therefore, manufacturing really matters. We also know that manufacturing has changed, that in the end, the skills that are needed are very different. It is not our father's manufacturing facility. Innovation and technology changes faster than we can change a light bulb. And it means that we have different expectations. And it's actually reflected in the workers that come into our facilities today. They need to be flexible, adaptable, capable of working in teams, running complex machines. They need to run it, fix it, and troubleshoot it all at the same time. It means the skill requirements have increased. And I'll apologize up front. I don't want to get on my education soapbox. But in the end, we as a nation have a challenge. And we have a challenge at how we engage young people today. And I don't know about anybody else, but I'm really excited to see the iPad example today. I love technology. And what we haven't managed to do is figure out how we infuse technology and get kids excited about the opportunities of their future. And it's not about issuing laptops to them. It's about the impact technology has on learning for them, so that individuals like me, the visual learners, the ones that need to do in order to succeed, have a school environment that allows me to do that. But we're also struggling with kids understanding science and math. I'll tell you a story. My 8th grade math teacher, don't laugh, his name was Mr. Hard. Isn't that funny? What math teacher would be named Mr. Hard? When I was in the 8th grade, probably about halfway through the school year, I still have the note, Mr. Hard sent a note home to my mother. Dear Mrs. Boucher, Jenny is really good in math. I think you should encourage her. My mother's a first-generation immigrant with a high school diploma. My father was a Depression child that ended up in an orphanage. 8th grade education. Do you think my parents were thinking about college? They were thinking about putting food on the table. But Mr. Hard said to my mother, Jennifer is good in math, so you should encourage her. The difference Mr. Hard made in my life is that math was never hard. And it didn't mean that I didn't struggle through quadratic equations and calculus, because who doesn't? Other than my husband, he's a freak of nature. But in the end, it told me that I was going to be good at it. I just needed to figure out how to make it work for me. But the majority of kids don't have Mr. Hard in their life. But what I see here in this room is opportunity, because I know this is a volunteerism community. Then we have another challenge here. I'll go back to that first picture that we had of manufacturing and what people's perception are. And I would say we do an annual public perception index. Hands down, individuals understand manufacturing is important. If there were jobs created in their community, let it be manufacturing. They know that manufacturing pays more, contributes more, creates more jobs, just not for my kid. And I won't ask the individual parents here that are manufacturers to raise their hands and say, how many of you are encouraging your kids to go into careers in manufacturing? I don't know about anybody else, but I'm tired of being perceived as not being the jobs of the future. Because fundamentally, it is manufacturing that will solve our global challenges. It will be how we make things that will overcome the challenges that we face. And why wouldn't I want to be a part of that? Yet 80% of our nation's manufacturers today can't find qualified workers. 80%. Not only that, it's impacting their ability to do work. And you know, nothing happens until somebody sells something. And you can't sell something if you don't have enough people to make it standing behind you. In the end, it's about jobs. It's about how we make sure kids understand that manufacturing is really cool. And though those are national statistics, I actually know you have the same problem here. My colleague at WMEC, who's been working with us on some of these efforts, sent out an email about 6 months ago to the economic development communities in the chambers and said, hey, I'm interested in sitting around a table and talking to manufacturers. Do you think you're interested? 52 listening sessions later across the great state of Wisconsin, lo and behold, you got a problem here too. Unemployment, yet we can't find people. Huge student loan debts, yet people are unemployed. Negative image, yet lo and behold, it drives Wisconsin's economy. And manufacturers, no offense, you guys are great, you don't know what to do. So what do? It's a pretty big problem to take on by yourself. But in the end, how appropriate that we're here as a community. Because you can do it as a community. And what Jim heard was, in the end, across the great state of Wisconsin, there are pockets of excellence. I know that. And you know why I know that? Because every problem in this country has been solved somewhere. We just haven't figured out how to let someone else take advantage of it. We're good at reinventing the wheel. Let's put four together and make the car. Because that's what innovation is. It's about how we put aside our differences and collaborate for the greater good. Because as Waterford and the waterfront is, that's Wisconsin's future. We also know that the workforce is aging and that we have a problem. One of the manufacturers had a quote, "It's a breakdown in the traditional methods of recruiting employees." So what does that mean? Let's see. Room full of 100 manufacturers, and they'd say something like this. And I don't mean to be insulting. If they just showed up on time, I'd take it from there. Oh yeah, and they have to be drug-free, because that's a requirement. And I get a couple chuckles, but it's true. They run million-dollar, multi-million-dollar pieces of equipment. It's a reality of what we need in our workforce. Yet I previously showed that chart that said our skills are increasing, but lo and behold, our expectations are the bottom line of attendance and drug-free. We're also really good at just asking. So to the manufacturers in the room, I would ask the question, is that the way you run your business? Is that how you deal with your supply chain? Because we own part of this problem today. It's important to recognize that industry in general has outpaced how education keeps up, and it is our responsibility to support our most important investment, our future. But yet, where do our technical schools fall on this? Bottom. And you know, working with education can be difficult unless you're working with Brian and his peers here in Wisconsin. It's very easy. They're very responsive. But in the end, we speak two different languages. Because business is about the business of making things and doing things. And education is about raising our next generation global citizens, or offering hope and opportunity to somebody that's been impacted for what their next chance is going to be. In the end, we need to bridge those two. And how do we do that? I don't believe it's this. Because let me tell you, I'll go back to evidence-based. For over 10 years, we've been tracking the skills gap. It's probably closer to 20 by now. So great, I have a whole shelf full of reports that says, lo and behold, we have a problem. So what are we going to do about it? Let's stop talking about it, and let's take a step together. So what did we do? So what we did recognize is manufacturing fundamentally is a standards-based environment. When we do something, we know every step in the way, and we process improvement, and we make sure that we mitigate risk. How do we engage with the education system when we can't even tell them what we need? I know I need something different, I just don't know what it is. Because they can't do that 100 times over for every employer in the community. But yet manufacturers have spent millions of dollars creating standards. Standards in how they operate their business, standards in how they develop their professional workforce in things like Lean and Six Sigma. Standards. Common bridge in communication. We also recognize that in the end, it's a systems problem. And as manufacturing leaders in our communities, that's great, because we do systems better than anybody else. Back to that process improvement. And as I mentioned earlier, it's not your grandfather's or father's manufacturing environment, unless potentially you're going into the HR office, because we're still hiring by word of mouth. We managed, in running our business, to forget our most important supply chain, human capital. Because manufacturing is fundamentally dependent on innovation. And what is innovation? It's the human part of it. It's about the individual that had the idea that made the difference. We can't take a risk like this. We need to be purposeful. So wouldn't it be nice if? Let's change our thinking. So I know I'm not getting what I want. I know I need something different. I know I go through a lot of candidates and a very small number of them stay. So what if? What if I could communicate with my community partners? And I said to them, I need individuals that know how to do math, that have critical thinking skills, that show up on time drug-free. But there's more to it in my environment. They need to be able to read. Lo and behold, there's a tool for that. And there's a poster associated with it right back there called the National Career Readiness Credential. And what does the NCRC do? It ensures to a common metric across age, diversity, time in which somebody secured it, that they know how to do those skills. And why does that matter? Because a high school diploma for a transitioning worker today is very different than a high school diploma for someone that's graduating today. Who knows how they used math every single day? But that standards exist. And what I know about that standard, 47% of the content behind it was based on manufacturing jobs. Now, it's good for everybody, but it certainly is good for manufacturing. And then I'll take it from there. But wouldn't it even be better if they showed up, knew something about safety? Again, we're risk averse. We need to run good environments. We measure safety incidences. They knew something about production, general basics of manufacturing. Lo and behold, there's a standard for that too. And I know this one's known here in the great state of Wisconsin. It's called the Certified Production Technician. But are manufacturers using them? Do they value them? They spent time creating them. But have they thought about their human capital, not as a bottom line liability, but as their most important asset? So when we set on a journey to change this conversation, we said we're not going to tell educators how to teach. They are experts in that arena. But what we're going to tell them clearly to an industry-based standard is here is what success looks like. So it's no longer just about a high school diploma for a technical credential or a welding certificate, if they can't train and demonstrate to an American Welding Society standard, then is it a standard you want in your company? And that's a question for you. That's not going to train them your way, because education is about the good of the public trust and about how we as employers sit shoulder to shoulder with our partners in our talent supply chain and help them. And I know last year in Wisconsin alone, over 5,000 certifications were issued in this state across our partners. But I bet if I asked manufacturers in the room to raise their hands if they're using those standards in the recruitment, screening, and hiring process, maybe one or two would go up. So what is it we really expect and want? Is it really that they just show up on time? Or is it they show up on time, job ready, on day one? I'll remind you, we face a 20% cost differentiator. So what do we need? We need flexible partnerships. We need community partners. We need to leverage technology. We need to be active in our human capital supply chain. And more importantly, to the 8th graders in this nation, we need to help them understand math is really cool. And it may not seem like it now, but the places it's going to take you are incredible. And it's not about learning math our way. It's about helping them understand math their way. Because they're very different students than we are, or we were. But what we do know is if we get it right on the front end, they're going to use it for a lifetime. Because the one constant in the workplace today is change. So what does that mean for Racine and the county? I know you have a lot of assets. I don't know that you've got voice amplification yet. So what do? You knit together in the community the fabric of the best. And you stand together and say, we as employers will expect more, but here's what this means and how we help. And you use tools that are being deployed in your community. Inspire Wisconsin, piloted here in Racine, 52 employers signed up already to offer internships and mentorships and job shadowing. Who doesn't want to show off what they do? We're all executives. We love to talk about ourselves. What better than a group of young people to influence and say, you can do it too? Dream It, Do It, that's starting in Waukesha County. Help kids understand that manufacturing's cool. But that's not all. Somebody solved the transitioning military. How do we make sure that our servicemen and women don't get lost in the shuffle when they come back? It's our best trained workforce. Find the solution that will work best here. How do we communicate in their language? How do we use social networking? Somebody tried to get me to tweet the other day. I ran fast. But you know it's coming. And the network gets bigger. It uses standards. It takes the guessing out of the approach. It builds on the best assets of the leaders and the doers in this community and amplifies the voice. And in the end, that's good for every sector of our manufacturing economy. It's not just good for the automotive sector, the aviation sector. It's also good for every business that's dependent on us. Energy, transportation, distribution, and logistics. So all of a sudden, we as our nation's employers have simplified the conversation. Here's what it looks like in the end. And then, you know, the people walking in the doors, have the right skills now. But what's missing? I would argue it's you. So what do? Start with the conversation. Every great journey started with a single step. And it's about getting engaged with your high school. It's about picking up the phone and calling Brian and saying, what can I do? Sorry, long list of calls. He said, it's okay. It's about opening up your doors. I ran through the back streets in Milwaukee the other day, and I kept looking at buildings going, I want to go knock on the door and say, open them up. Let me see what you do, so other people can see it. It's about supporting the initiatives in your community. It's about pulling best practices from across the state. Why does it matter? Because we as manufacturers measure what matters. And we know it impacts recruiting, retention, workplace safety. More importantly, it engages your employees. Helps you help them to understand how important they are. And we're doing it across the country. And why are we doing it? Because we make really cool things. We make jets fly. We make medicines that save lives. We make drones that keep us safe, and the hybrid I park in my garage. We make really cool things. And I am manufacturing proud. Thank you.
I have to tell you, I am very proud of Jennifer as well, and you can tell by her passion that she is truly committed to helping all of us achieve our goal of not only creating a greater pipeline, but sharing the message about the importance of manufacturing at all levels of our community. And so we thank you very much. And I have to share with you that you being here today really matters, right? So Jennifer, on behalf of RCEDC, we have a small token of our appreciation, something that we made, because we make things here. So thanks again for being with us. So I know you're all dying to know when the next billboard for Gateway comes out that says Gateway to Innovation. You know it's just around the corner, right? Thanks for the great slogan for next year's campaign. We appreciate that. So let's learn.